If you're asking me this now. Her voice trembled, but she didn't flinch. Then maybe I was wrong this whole time. Maybe you never saw me beyond that first moment. He stared at her, searching for something to hold on to, but found only the weight of silence. And when she stepped away, she didn't look back. That's how she left. Not in anger, but in clarity. And that's how he lost the one person who had never asked for anything. Except the truth. But what happens when a man who built his empire on control realizes the one thing he can't afford to lose is her? This isn't a story about fairy tale beginnings. It's about mistakes, resilience, and the kind of love that only survives if it's real enough to break and strong enough to rebuild. If you believe in second chances and the quiet power of being truly seen, stay with us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story that touches the heart. Now let's begin. The hum of distant music trembled under her skin as Ellie Grace stepped into the hushed glow of the Sky Lounge atop the Halcyon. A 5-star hotel where the ceilings looked like they belonged to a museum and the air smelled like secrets and money. She didn't belong here. Not in this borrowed black dress that clung too tightly around the waist, not in these heels that made her ankles ache with every step, and definitely not under this light soft and golden designed to flatter women used to being noticed. She was 24, broke invisible. This was supposed to be her sister's job, a temporary gig hosting VIP guests at a private corporate event. But Sophie had slipped on the subway steps that morning, her ankle swollen like a balloon. And so Ellie, who was meant to be handling coat check in the lobby, found herself here holding a silver tray and pretending her heart wasn't trying to flee the room. Just pass the drinks and keep your head down. Sophie had whispered between winces, "You won't have to talk to anyone." But someone noticed her. He stood near the balcony windows, a silhouette against the soft skyline. Tall, still self-contained. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and his hands rested loosely around a glass he wasn't drinking from. It was his eyes that caught her calm, unreadable and trained directly on her. Ellie glanced away, but he was already moving. He didn't hurry. He didn't speak until he was close enough for her to smell something clean and expensive on his collar. "You're early," he said. Her eyebrows drew together. I'm sorry." His gaze didn't waver. "They said you were discreet. That you preferred the back entrance. Smart." A pause. "I think there's been a mistake," she said carefully. He reached into the inside of his jacket and pulled out a slim black card. It had a gold emblem stamped at the center. "Penthouse," he said. In 30 minutes, then he turned and walked away like nothing needed further explanation. Ellie stared at the card in her palm, then at him, the quiet way he moved, the way he didn't check if she followed. She should have run after him, corrected him, told the truth. But before she could take a step, a man in a dark suit stepped into her path with a polite smile. "This way, Miss VIPs are waiting." She swallowed hard words rising in her throat, but falling short. She pivoted to leave, but at the exit, a woman in a navy blazer blocked her with a clipboard and a practiced expression. "Ellie Grace. Yes, Mr. Julian West has you scheduled for onboarding at the Westmore building tomorrow, 8:30 sharp. You'll be his new assistant." Ellie's hands went cold. The key card was still in her palm, and somewhere in her chest, something strange was starting to stir. What kind of man makes a mistake like that and turns it into a job? Maybe it was a dream. A fevered, half-wild dream born from exhaustion and a borrowed pair of heels. But at exactly 9 o'clock, when Ellie gave her name at the sleek marble reception desk, the woman behind the counter didn't blink. "West is expecting you," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Top-floor private elevator. So Ellie rode the elevator alone, glass walls revealing the city stretching outward in every direction, rooftops shrinking as she rose to a height she'd never imagined herself reaching, at least not like this. When the doors opened, she stepped into silence. Thick carpet, clean lines, walls that gleamed, a world curated to perfection. And there he was, Julian West. Standing at the far end of the room, back to her, one hand holding a phone, the other drumming a quiet, rhythmic tap against his leg. His posture was impossibly still, controlled. The same tailored suit as the night before, only now with a tie and not a single strand of hair out of place. He ended the call, turned, and met her gaze. "You came?" he said. Ellie tightened her grip around the coffee cup she held like a shield. "I wasn't sure I should." He nodded slightly. Most wouldn't. And that's what I needed to know. He gestured to a chair by a minimalist table. She didn't move. "You think I'm someone I'm not," she said, steady, though something burned quietly behind her ribs. "I thought that," he said, stepping closer. "Now I don't. You offered me a job by mistake." "No," he replied. "I offered it because you didn't crumble when you were misread." She had no reply for that. He picked up a folder and handed it to her. The paper was heavy, cream-colored. No nonsense. "Personal assistant," he said simply, "scheduling correspondence, calendar management. Some travel discretion required." She opened it and stopped. The salary printed on the page made her breath catch more than she had earned in the past 5 years, even with 3 jobs and no time to sleep. Still, she looked up. Why me? Julian didn't look away, because everyone in this building either tries to impress me or avoids me. You didn't do either. You don't know me. And that's the point. That's how it began. By dusk. Ellie had a badge clipped to her blazer, a small glass-walled desk adjacent to his office, and a schedule that made her question every life decision she had ever made. The hours were relentless, the demands merciless. Julian never raised his voice, never repeated himself, never waited. If she didn't keep pace, he moved past her. If she over-explained, his eyes narrowed like she was a puzzle that wasn't worth solving. But the strangest thing, it wasn't how cold he was, it was how quiet. He never gossiped, never grandstanded, never flirted. He listened, he read everything, he remembered everything. Once, while reviewing a press release, he paused only briefly before saying, "Rewrite the 3rd paragraph. It's trying too hard to sound like certainty and ends up sounding like fear." She rewrote it. He nodded. That was all. No praise, no smile. But somehow, it was enough. The rest of the office kept their distance. People whispered, smiled politely, too politely as she passed. One afternoon, she found a note on her desk. No signature, no expelliation. Don't get comfortable. He goes through assistants like coffee filters. She didn't show it to him. She didn't need to. She just worked. And every night she boarded the late train back to her tiny apartment, collapsed on the couch with aching feet, and wondered what it meant to survive a world that had no place for softness. When Ellie finally stumbled through the door of their apartment, Sophie had a bowl of reheated pasta waiting and a familiar smirk on her face. So her younger sister asked, "Are we quitting yet?" Ellie sank into the couch, unzipping her boots 1 slow inch at a time. Not yet. Because for every impossible demand, for every look that sliced, rather than soothed, something about Julian West kept her anchored. Maybe it was the way he looked at the world, like it had burned him once too often. Maybe it was the way he carried silence, not as emptiness, but as armor. Or maybe it was the fact that he had looked at her a stranger and somehow decided she belonged, even if she hadn't. Whatever it was. Ellie knew one thing. She didn't come to play his game, but she was already on the board. The first week vanished in a blur, meetings stacked like bricks. Names she couldn't remember, acronyms that meant nothing yet. She learned fast. She had to. Julian didn't repeat himself, didn't soften edges, didn't explain. With him, silence wasn't absence, it was expectation. By the second week, Ellie could read him in moments. A quiet shift in posture meant dissatisfaction. A still flick of his pen meant she needed to end the call for a while. He never offered praise. The only confirmation she was doing well was the simple, quiet fact she was still there. She told herself it didn't matter, but it did. Then came the gala. She hadn't been assigned to it. Large-scale events were typically run by the external PR team, but 2 hours before it began, Julian appeared at her office door, sharp as ever. "You're coming with me." Ellie blinked, setting her pen down. "I'm sorry." "You'll manage coordination on site," he replied without pause. "My last assistant used to." She stood slowly, "Mr. West. I've never." "You'll manage," he said, already turning away. Julian didn't traffic in questions, he dealt in outcomes. That night she wore a simple black dress, clean, understated. Her hair was pinned back in a way no one would remember. She remained at his side through it all, clipboard in hand, murmuring names, updates, cues. Her voice never rose above a whisper, but he always heard her. People noticed. They always noticed when someone stood beside him. Only tonight the whispers weren't behind her back. They were in front of her face. "Isn't that the girl from the Halcyon rooftop? She just showed up and now runs his schedule. How do you think she got the job?" Ellie kept her face perfectly composed. She had learned neutrality, but inside something cracked, soft, sharp, spreading like a fracture in glass. Near the end of the night, Julian was deep in conversation with two sharp-suited investors. Ellie stood nearby, quietly managing details, when movement caught the corner of her eye. A woman approached, tall, blonde, certain Celeste. Wynne, the PR queen, the polished fixer. The only woman Julian had ever been seen with for more than 8 weeks. Ellie had seen her in magazines, headlines, rumors. All flawless. Celeste didn't hesitate. She walked straight to her heels, clicking like punctuation. A champagne flute hung from her hand like it was part of her weaponry. "You must be the new assistant," she said, eyes glinting. Ellie met her gaze without flinching. "I am." Celeste's lips curved. "Interesting. You have that look. Disposable. Like you won't last the month." Ellie smiled just barely. "Funny," she said, voice low and even. "You'd know what that looks like." Celeste's smile faltered for a mere second, like porcelain cracking under pressure, before she leaned in, voice soft and venom-laced. "Be careful, darling. He doesn't keep people. He keeps silence. You'll see." Before Ellie could form a reply, Julian turned. His gaze flicked between them, brief, unreadable, and Celeste melted away without another word, her heels echoing like a warning. The ride home was muted, the kind of quiet that echoed louder than speech. Julian sat still, sharp and unreadable in the dim back seat. The driver up front was sealed off behind soundproof glass. Ellie stared out the window, wondering which version of herself was watching the city blur past the girl from Coat Check, or the assistant now caught in something she hadn't agreed to. Just before they reached her apartment, he spoke. "You handled her well." She turned her head. "Was that what this was?" she asked. Another test. He didn't answer. And she didn't wait for one. By morning, everything unraveled. A gossip blog, infamous for scandals and speculation, published a photo. Grainy cropped, taken from across the lounge weeks ago. It showed Julian handing Ellie a sleek black card. The headline screamed across the screen, "Tech mogul Julian West, accused of hiring escort under guise of staff role." They didn't use her name. They didn't have to. The timing, the implication, the dress. It all pointed to one person. By midday, the whispering in the office had sharpened into stares. By afternoon, someone slipped a file marked HR review onto her desk. By evening, she was summoned to the top floor. She entered the office with her spine straight and her breath held tight. Julian stood by the window, always by the window, one hand in his pocket, the other clenched into stillness. "You saw the article," he said. "Everyone has." His jaw tensed. "It's not true." "No," she replied. "But does that matter?" He turned to face her. "It does to me." She folded her arms, pulse quick. "You're the one who gave me that card. You're the one who assumed I was someone else. I corrected it. You amplified it. That landed. She saw it, not anger, but something deeper. A flicker of guilt. I thought you were someone else, he said finally, voice low. And when I realized you weren't, I didn't know how to fix it without making it worse. You could have started with an apology. He looked down. Her voice, though calm, was sharp. Why did you really hire me, Julian? His eyes met hers again. Because when I misread you, you didn't crumble. You didn't retreat. You stood still. That's not a reason. It is to me. She shook her head once. Well, it's not enough for me. And this time when she turned to leave, he didn't stop her, but something in his eyes, something unspoken, said she had done what no one else ever had. She had unsettled Julian West. The following days were colder. Not by weather, but by presence. He didn't fire her, didn't reassign her, didn't reduce her hours. But something shifted. The silence, once neutral, had become distant, lined with a kind of guilt she couldn't name. Ellie still showed up on time, still organized his calendar, still typed every memo with mechanical precision. But the flickers of humanity between them, the small fleeting exchanges that had made the job feel like more than survival, were gone. Until the storm. It came on a Thursday unannounced. A citywide blackout rolled through like a wave. Traffic lights blinked out, offices shuttered early. The skyline dimmed. The Westmore building switched to emergency power, just enough to keep the core systems breathing. Elevators halted. Top floors quieted. Most of the staff cleared out within the hour, but Ellie stayed. There was a document, a deal. Julian insisted had to be finalized before midnight. You can go, he said, eyes still on the screen. She hesitated, and then she stayed. There's nothing else I need, Julian said, still reviewing the contract draft on his screen. Ellie didn't move. He didn't look up. Unless you've miraculously learned to proof legal clauses better than my attorney, he added dryly. She stepped forward, chin slightly raised. You spelled partnership wrong. 3 times that made him pause. He looked up, their eyes met across the table, and something flickered. Not warmth, not yet, but something less sharp. Humor, challenge, maybe even the outline of a truce. He handed her the document. Fine. Show me. They sat together in his private office across a table strewn with papers and shadows. The only light came from the glow of his laptop and the low amber strip near the windows. Outside, the city slept beneath the storm, its lights snuffed out by the blackout. Inside, it felt like another universe. At some point, Julian slipped off his jacket, rolled his sleeves and leaned back. He read in absolute silence, his eyes darting quickly over text, his fingers tapping once for every paragraph that didn't quite make sense. You always do that, Ellie said quietly. Do what, tap? Like it's Morse code. He glanced at his hand, then at her. Maybe I like rhythm noise I can control. She nodded, not entirely sure why her chest tightened at that answer. Then without warning, he asked, Why did you really stay that night at the Halcyon? Her eyes narrowed. You mean, after you handed me a hotel key like I was? Yes. She leaned back, arms folded. Because I was too stunned to walk away, because I didn't know whether to slap you or laugh. And because some strange part of me wanted to see what kind of man could make a mistake like that and still be so sure of himself. He didn't smile, but his voice lost its edge. I wasn't always like that, detached, cold. What happened? He hesitated. I trusted someone once. She sold that trust like a product. Lesson learned, Ellie didn't press. The silence between them stretched not heavy, but thoughtful. I read the article again, he said suddenly. You were brave. She tilted her head, amused. You noticed something. You never denied it. I didn't think I had to. You don't owe me anything, he said quietly. But you deserve clarity. So do I. Ellie set her pen down and looked him full in the face, then asked the question you've been avoiding. He did. Have you ever done that kind of work? Her voice didn't waver. No, not once. She paused, then added, but you never truly believed I had, did you? You just wanted to see if I could survive what this place assumed about me. He exhaled slowly. Maybe I needed to believe that you could. She stood, gathering her notes. You don't get to throw people into fire just to see if they'll burn. As she turned to leave, he spoke. You didn't. Ellie paused, half in shadow. He looked up. You're not what I expected, Julian said. She turned back slowly. Neither are you. When the power finally returned, it was almost midnight. Julian held the elevator door open for her. It was the first time he ever had. The following weeks began to shift in small, almost imperceptible ways. Julian started bringing her into meetings, not to take notes, but to speak. When his communications director resigned, he asked Ellie to step in temporarily. You seem to know how to manage a storm, he said. She did, and she handled it with quiet precision. One evening, after a day that had stretched them both too thin, he offered her a ride home. She declined. He insisted. In the car, the silence wasn't awkward. It was filled with the scent of leather and the weight of everything unsaid. He spoke first. Why do you live there, in that part of the city? It's what I can afford. You could afford better now. She turned to him, her voice soft but sure. It's not about money. It's about staying close. My sister's school is 5 blocks from our apartment. I'm not moving until she's done. I promised her we'd stay until she graduates, Ellie said softly. Julian looked at her like he was seeing something new, something he hadn't quite allowed himself to notice before. You don't walk away from people, he murmured. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Another night long after the last elevator chimed and the city had gone quiet, he found her asleep in the staff lounge. Her jacket was draped over her like a shield. Files were scattered across her lap, one page still gripped in her hand. Julian didn't wake her. He simply stood there for a moment watching. Then he reached for the light switch and left her in peace. Then came the acquisition, a monumental deal. Media swarmed from across the country. Cameras, questions, microphones, every detail choreographed to perfection. Ellie stood behind the curtain, headset in place, clipboard, steady eyes scanning the timing of every cue. She directed the chaos like a conductor of silence. Julian stood just behind her, watching her more than the press. You're good at this, he said quietly. She didn't turn. Don't sound so surprised, I'm not. She looked at him then. Really? His voice didn't rise, but it landed. I've never been more certain of anything. The words weren't loud, but they didn't need to be. They lingered in the air between them like silk, soft, impossible to ignore. Later that night, after the conference lights dimmed and the crowd vanished, Ellie returned to her desk and found a small box inside a necklace. Simple, understated, nothing meant to impress, only to acknowledge, and a note. Just 5 words. For the woman I misjudged. She didn't wear it the next day, but she placed it carefully in her bag, just in case. The morning arrived with practiced rhythm. Ellie arrived early, reviewed Julian's schedule, prepped talking points for an investor meeting, and finalized his updated flight plans. Everything ran too smoothly, and it was always those days, the quiet ones, that unraveled the fastest around noon. Julian was behind closed doors with the board. Ellie waited outside, reviewing a legal memo when her phone buzzed. Sophie. You okay? What's going on? Ellie frowned. What do you mean? Another message arrived before she could finish typing. Your name is everywhere. Google it. Right now. She opened her browser, and her breath left her. Across the front page of the most vicious gossip site in the country, the headline screamed, Ellie Grace. Too close to the CEO insider alleges, inappropriate rise through the ranks. Below the headline, a collage of blurry images. A moment at the Halcyon rooftop, her beside Julian at the gala, and a photo taken from somewhere private of Julian gently brushing her shoulder. No names, no confirmations, only implication, only poison. The article dripped with anonymous quotes. She came out of nowhere. No one gets that close unless something's being traded. She's manipulating him. It didn't matter that none of it was sourced, that nothing was proven. Perception doesn't wait for truth. It devours it. Within hours, her inbox flooded. Cruel messages, speculation, judgment. By late afternoon, her name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Ellie sat frozen at her desk. 2 employees walked by not quietly enough. So it's true. One whispered, "Guess we know." Now said the other. Julian canceled his remaining meetings that afternoon. She knocked on his door once. No answer again. Still nothing. She waited. Not because she didn't have the strength to leave, but because her silence was louder than her presence. At 6:45, his door finally opened. He stepped out, sleeves rolled up his face, unreadable. "Ellie," he said quietly, "come in." She rose slowly. He was already seated, posture composed, gaze steady. "You've seen it," Julian said simply. "Of course I've seen it. Is it true?" The question hit harder than she expected. Her breath snagged. "Are you really asking me that?" Ellie's voice was calm, but a fracture ran just beneath the surface. Julian leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in front of his mouth. "I need to know," he said quietly, "if there's something I've missed. Anything I didn't see. You mean anything you haven't already assumed?" Her voice trembled now, not from weakness, but from the weight of all the restraint she'd carried. "You gave me a job based on a mistake," she continued, "but everything else I earned. You know I did silence." And then she added even softer, "And if you're questioning me now, maybe I've been wrong about you all along. Maybe you never saw me as anything more than the first impression." Julian didn't respond immediately, but then he stood, slowly, quietly. "You're not wrong," he said. Ellie blinked. "I beg your pardon, I didn't see you clearly. Not then. Maybe not even now." He swallowed hard. "But I never doubted your work, and I never believed that article. Then why ask?" He hesitated. "Because I've spent years building something that doesn't tolerate uncertainty. The only way to stay ahead is to question everything." She stepped back. "Just one step, but enough. And what if questioning me is the very thing that made you lose me?" He didn't answer, so she gave him silence in return and walked away. The next morning, she didn't come to the office. By midday, she hadn't returned his calls. By nightfall, she was gone. No dramatic goodbyes, no expelliation. Just absence. She packed 2 suitcases, took her sister with her, and accepted a spare guest room in a quiet countryside house offered by an old friend. No headlines, no city noise, just stillness and room to breathe. But the world didn't pause. The story, that ugly false story, grew like wildfire. Julian issued a formal denial, threatened legal action. The blog issued a retraction, but the damage was already done. And then 7 days later came the truth. While auditing their internal systems, Julian's security team traced the source of the leak. It hadn't come from outside. It came from inside, from Evelyn Vale. She had accessed an old PR channel, one she still had credentials for, and sent the doctored images herself, not for money, for vengeance. She'd watched Ellie take a place beside Julian, she once claimed as her own, and she wanted her erased. When Julian read the report, he didn't explode, he acted. Within 24 hours, Evelyn's ties to his ventures were quietly severed, her name removed from boards, meetings, partnerships, no lawsuit, no headline, just erasure, and in their world, silence was punishment, but even that couldn't undo the one loss he cared about. Ellie, 10 days passed. Then he drove alone, without staff, without warning. And when she opened the door to the small lakeside house barefoot and wrapped in a sweater, He almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, but because she looked farther away. "How did you find me?" she asked. "The lease on the car," he said. "It was still in the system." She stepped aside wordlessly. He entered. Mia was gone, perhaps at school, perhaps left to give them space. Julian stood in the quiet. "You were right," he said finally. "About Evelyn. About everything. I have the proof." Ellie didn't flinch, didn't even blink. "I published the findings in our internal report. You've been fully cleared." She looked at him then, and for the first time, her eyes weren't angry, just tired. "That doesn't clear the silence." He nodded slowly. "I know." They stood like that, unmoving, surrounded by the hush of things unsaid. "I'm not good at this," he admitted. "I've spent most of my life managing risk, controlling perception. I don't know how to lose people, or how to keep them, the right way." Ellie crossed her arms. "I never asked you to keep me." "I know," he said. "That's why—" He paused, and then met her gaze. "That's why I'm asking you to come back. You can't just say that like it's some kind of proposal," Ellie said quietly, the door still half open behind her. "It's not a proposal," Julian replied. "It's a hope, for the first time since their world fractured." She looked at him, really looked, the crease in his brow, the tension locked in his jaw, and something raw in his gaze. Uncertainty. She stepped in slowly, close enough to feel the weight of everything they hadn't said. "Do you want an assistant?" she asked. "No, a fixer." He shook his head. "Then what exactly do you want from me, Julian?" His answer came after a beat of silence. "Time," he said. "Just that. A single word, not businesslike, not calculated, just honest." Ellie didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her steps carried her toward the small kitchen tucked into the corner of the quiet country cottage. She poured 2 glasses of water, hands steady thoughts. Not he, followed. Still quiet. "I needed space," she said softly, setting 1 glass on the counter between them. "I know I needed to know who I was, outside of your world." And now he asked. She turned, looked at him, and for the first time didn't feel like she had to brace herself. "I'm still me," she said. "I don't miss the conference calls, the sideways glances, or walking through that office like I was a rumor on legs. But I do miss something." His brow lifted slightly. "What you—" she said. Before the silence, before the damage needed fixing. Something softened in his expression, a brief, genuine smile. It wasn't the kind meant for headlines. It was the kind you gave to someone who had already seen your shadows. "I wasn't sure you'd say that," he said. "But I hoped." She sipped the water, then set the glass down and folded her arms gently. "If I return, it won't be to the same chair. I won't be standing behind you." Julian nodded slowly. "You shouldn't. I want to stand beside you as an equal. Then that's what we build." They returned to the city without fanfare. No headlines, no press statements. Just 2 people choosing to walk back into the noise together, this time with intention. Ellie never sat at her old desk again. Julian introduced her as Director of Strategic Vision, a title vague enough to confuse outsiders, but clear enough within the company she was here to lead. People still whispered. But this time she didn't lower her gaze, and this time Julian didn't stay silent. He asked for her opinion, backed her calls, listened. He was still composed, still guarded. But there were moments, small, unannounced moments, where something in him cracked open. Sometimes he lingered in her office, just to sit sipping coffee as she spoke about books, dreams, things far from boardrooms and spreadsheets. "Even Mia noticed you're lighter now," she said one night as Ellie stirred pasta on the stove. "Lighter. Like you finally exhaled." Maybe she had. The real shift came weeks later. A late strategy meeting had stretched into night, the office mostly dark. Outside, the city glowed in a hush, skyscrapers blinking like constellations. Ellie stood at the window, arms folded, thinking about how far she had come from the rooftop of the Halcyon. Julian stepped in loosened tie, holding 2 takeaway coffees. He handed her one. "You good?" he asked. She didn't respond immediately, then softly. "Sometimes I think about the night we met, and I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't mistaken me." Julian stepped closer. "You would have walked out," he said. "And I wouldn't have followed." Probably she nodded. "And we never would have had this." He took a sip of coffee. "Then maybe I'm grateful I got it wrong." She turned to him, eyes steady. "You're not afraid. I'll hold that over you." He gave a small crooked smile. "You already do. You've already apologized 3 times. Ellie murmured, the corners of her lips curling, not from amusement, but from surprise. Julian stood beside her near enough that she could feel the quiet weight of his presence, yet not touching. Together they watched the city lights flicker through the glass. Beneath the buzz of the skyline, silence pressed in soft and sure, but not the kind that hurts. This one held room for healing. "I still owe you a real one," he said. She looked at him from the side. For what he kept his gaze forward, for letting silence speak louder than I ever dared to, for not stepping between you and the storm when I should have, and for assuming you'd be okay just because you didn't break. Ellie lowered her eyes to the coffee cup in her hands. It had gone lukewarm, but she held it like it still mattered. "You mean that she asked I do?" She let the quiet hang a moment longer. "Then all right, I'll take your apology. On one condition." "What's that?" "That you stop treating feelings like they're a business deal." A dry, tired laugh escaped him, the kind that came from somewhere honest. "That may take some practice." "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly. "We've got time." Julian turned fully, now facing her without armor. "You were the only person who didn't try to win me over," he said. "You didn't flinch when I failed to see you. You just stayed. That scared you, terrified me." He admitted, "I've spent most of my life behind glass, but somehow you walked in without asking for a key." Ellie met his eyes. "I wasn't trying to. I know." For once, the silence between them didn't ache. It didn't demand to be filled. It simply settled, gentle as breath. And when he reached for her hand, slow, careful asking, she didn't pull away. Her fingers found his like they belonged there. 6 months later, the company unveiled its most ambitious project. Yet, an international initiative spanning 5 cities, 3 industries, and more complexity than most would dare to touch. Ellie stood near the stage, at the launch gala, headset in place, clipboard in hand, calm, focused, in command. She wasn't the assistant anymore, wasn't a shadow. She was seen. When the final applause echoed and the crowd began to drift, she slipped down the side steps, ready to disappear into the wings, but Julian was already waiting. He held out a glass of water and offered a smile, quiet, but full of meaning. "You missed your moment up there." "I wasn't looking for one," she replied. He tilted his head slightly. "Maybe, but it found you anyway." She scanned the room. "Where's your security?" "I left them," he said. "Now that doesn't sound like you. I'm working on being someone new." "Do I know him?" she teased. Julian stepped a little closer. His voice lowered. "I think you're the reason he exists." The room buzzed with music and soft laughter, but between them there was only stillness. "I used to believe control was everything," he said. "But then you walked into my life like an error I couldn't erase, and you became the only thing I never wanted to lose." Ellie's expression softened. "I used to think power looked like towering offices and glass walls," she said. "But now I know. It's walking beside someone who never asked you to prove your worth." Julian reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, a delicate necklace shimmered in the light, the same one he had once given her now, with a small star charm added to the chain. She touched it gently. Why the star? Because you never needed my world to shine, he said. You brought your own light. She took a slow breath, then slid her hand into his, and they walked forward, not toward a perfect future, but toward one they would write together. A story of earned trust, of silent reckonings, of love that didn't have to be loud to be real. Some stories don't begin with fireworks. They begin in shadow with a mistake, a misstep, a silence that echoes longer than it should. But the most extraordinary ones, they aren't the ones born perfect. They're the ones we choose to stay in, even after the cracks, after the misunderstandings, long after the worst parts have unfolded. That's the kind of story Ellie and Julian found themselves in. Not one written in headlines or promises, but in the way he showed up without asking her to come back. In the way she stayed, not because she had nowhere else to be, but because for the first time, she wanted to belong on her own terms. Months passed. They built a new rhythm, not one led by deadlines, but by pauses, by trust, by late evenings, where the silence no longer cut like a blade, but settled like a song half remembered and finally found again. Julian learned how to ask. Instead of assume, Ellie learned how to answer without armor. And every once in a while, when the city quieted just enough, they'd walk the long way home, fingers intertwined, not needing to fill the space between them with anything more than presence. She still wore the necklace. Not for what it symbolized then, but for what it meant now. Not apology, but arrival. On their anniversary, Julian didn't plan anything grand. No rooftop gardens, no catered dinners, just a note tucked into the corner of her desk in his even handwriting. Thank you for staying in the story. She found him hours later standing in the doorway of the bookstore. They had helped restore the one that smelled like old pages and possibility. And she said there was never a page I wanted to turn more slowly. They didn't need vows. Their quiet was enough, because sometimes the loudest love is the kind that never asks to be noticed. It just stays. Some love stories begin with flowers and promises, but the ones that stay with us, they often begin with a misunderstanding, a silence, a single moment of misjudgment. This was never about perfection. It was about two people learning that love isn't built in boardrooms or candlelit ballrooms. It's built in the quiet, in the forgiveness, in the choice to stay when leaving feels easier. Ellie and Julian didn't find each other in the best version of themselves. They found each other in the mess, in the gray, in the questions, and from there, they chose to build something real. Because in the end, the strongest love isn't the one that never broke, it's the one that shattered, and still chose to begin again. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of how powerful resilience and grace can be, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that speak straight to the heart. Until next time, stay kind, stay open, and never stop believing in the quiet magic of love that endures.